morning, everyone. How we doing? Yeah, we're doing good. Hey, let's stand and worship today. We're gonna sing about we are grateful for all that God does. There's no room for complaining in God's house. So let's sing together. This is the day the Lord has made. This is the day that you have made. Whatever comes, I won't complain. For all my hope is in your name, and now your joy awaits my praise. I give thanks for all you have done, and I will sing of your mercy and your love. Your love is unfailing. Lord, I am grateful. What are you grateful for? When I was down, you brought me out and set my feet on higher ground. So here I stand. You are my God. Your faithfulness, my solid rock. I give thanks for all you have done, and I will sing of your mercy and your love. Your love is unfailing. Lord, I am grateful. I give thanks for all you have done. I won't forget all the battles you have won. Your love is unfailing. Lord, I am grateful. His kingdom comes to earth. Let's sing. And as we lift our heads up, heaven's open, heaven's open. So let our lives declare the love of God has spoken over us. And as we lift our heads up, heaven's open, heaven's open. So let our lives declare the love our God has spoken over us. Yeah, He's spoken over us. I give thanks for all you have done. Your mercy and your love is unfailing. Lord, I am grateful. I give thanks for all you have done. I won't forget all the battles you have won. Your love is unfailing. Lord, I am grateful.
Sing, I love you, Lord. I love you, Lord. Oh, your mercy never fails me. All my days I've been held in your hands. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, and I will sing of the goodness of God. All my days, and all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath
How's everyone doing today? Awesome. I love it. Hey, my name is Muriel, and I have here with me Chelsea, and I invited Chelsea up to host with me today, one, because I've seen God grow so much in her as we have just kind of had our relationship for a really long time as close friends, but also because she just has really good insight into how God's working in her life. And honestly, our relationship probably started when we were just like studying through scripture a while back, and has just developed into something really deep and able to like just walk alongside each other as we've been pursuing Jesus. And that's meant like as we've like grown our families and into motherhood, and even this past Sunday, yesterday. What day is it? Yesterday.
First time.
Yesterday, we both like got to like participate in a parent equipping gathering here at Movement, where we got to really just like dive into what does discipleship look like in our homes with our children as parents, and how we can be representatives of God to our children and providing this accurate picture of who God is, and just being able to point our kids to Jesus, knowing like they have a desperate need for them just as much as we do. So Chelsea has kind of like gone through this, and she's read the book that went along with everything. And so share just like what you feel like has stood out to you from yesterday, and just what God's been revealing to you.
Yesterday was really great. I could talk all about how I was convicted. This girl better have been convicted, you know. But
I don't know what to do with her.
But no, something that God has been really reminding me over several months, actually, since I did read the book. For the past few months, my husband and I. Was that funny?
You acted like I didn't read the book. I read most of it. I might have skipped some chapters.
She didn't.
Oh, sorry. Keep going.
Derailed. My husband and I have been dealing with some dental issues with my daughter, Ruby. And it's been very difficult, and it's all culminated in this Wednesday. She is going to go under at the hospital for that procedure. And obviously, amidst all the fears and worry which we have, God's reminding me that Ruby is not my child. She is God's child. Mm-hmm. And I can try and keep all the bad things from her from happening, but ultimately He has control, He has the power, and He has the plan for her. And I need to rest in the fact that that plan is good and will ultimately be glorifying to Him.
Mm-hmm, right. And I love how so often as we like discover God's truths in our lives, and we come to like these big moments or difficult seasons where like so much of that happens like because we're in relationships with other people. And whether it's like as you're discipling your kids, as you're in like relationship with your husband and in your move group and the people that you're around, like those relationships of people pointing us to Jesus is what helps to encourage us and challenge us when we really need that. And we need that all the time. And each one of us has a step to take relationally in pursuing Jesus alongside other people. And if that's you and you're thinking, man, I don't have that yet, or I need to start some of those relationships, I want to, then I would just encourage you to take a simple step of filling out a Connect card. And that'll help us to be able to follow up with you and help you discover what that next step is. And even for Chelsea and I, like one of our first steps into relationship in the community was through move groups. And move groups are where groups of people are meeting together, usually twice a month, sharing a meal together, praying together in scripture, and just living life as we all pursue Jesus together. And that's really significant, like as we follow Jesus as well.
And Muriel mentioned the Connect card, and I know most of you don't know what that is because we don't talk about it very much here. So hold tight. P.S. If you're new here, we talk about the Connect card all the time. I'm going to teach you how to go through it. So there's a pocket on the back of the seat in front of you that has a physical Connect card there. It's really simple: name, phone, email, and then a message and a prayer request. I'm actually going to fill one out for my sweet baby girl, Ruby. And then you can drop that in the Dropbox as you're leaving church today, or there's one in the back of the lobby. Whoa. So then, anyways, and then if you don't want to do that paper copy, you can do it online and just take out your phone and put it in front of that circle thing that's on the back with the dots, the black dots that's on the back of your seat.
QR code.
I don't want to say that word, but yes, that's what it
It's like a
is.
bad word to
And
Chelsea.
it'll take you to the online form that you will submit. If you don't wish to connect with us in either of those ways, or you want more, Muriel and I will be in the back over by the garage doors with the arrows. I'm not going to say please come and connect with us. I'm going to dare you to come and connect with us, because
It's a big dare.
with Muriel, you get well-spoken, nice, but
get
with me,
predictability.
you don't know what's going
Wild
to come out of my
card.
mouth, especially if it's like in an awkward silence, like meeting you for the first time situation. So if you want to navigate that with me, which I am very looking forward to, please do so. And then if you're new, I have a little present for you.
There you go. Hey, so we also will donate $5 on your behalf. If you're new and you fill out one of those Connect cards, we'll donate that $5 to Lifeline Christian Mission. And that's one of our partner organizations, and they do great work in planning churches around the world and caring for people in very vulnerable places. And maybe you've been a part of like meal packings here that we've done in the past at Movement, but that's through Lifeline, and that's one of the really tangible ways that we can be a part of helping them share the gospel with people and care for them, and people that maybe have never been introduced to Jesus ever, that we get to be a part of seeing God's kingdom multiply through our generosity, and just even by starting by filling out a Connect card. And if you're interested in move groups, I'm not sure that I said this, make sure to just write that on that Connect card too. That way we can know what you want to start diving into.
And generosity, we talk about it a lot because it's very important. We are interested in seeing God's kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. And so when you give financially to Movement, that allows them to equip all of us to go and be the church in any situation we see in life. So if you want to do that, there are two ways. You can see that pocket. There's the envelope that you can put your money in and drop in the drop boxes, or you can scan that circle black dot thing.
QR code again. Yeah, so just as we've talked, like we want to multiply God's kingdom, we want to see his will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And part of that is as we talk, like it's going and being the church in our everyday spaces and around the people that we're with frequently. And so we get to hear from someone who's a part of our community that is putting that into action. And because of your generosity, stories like this can happen. So check out this video.
Hey, I'm here with Connie today, and Connie, you've been part of our Movement family since the very beginning, and you're just a person who has continued to live out mission, and especially in the way that you invest in other people and invest in discipling relationships. And I just am excited to sit down with you and hear a little bit more about what that's looked like for you. But you'll notice that today we're not at Movement for this video. We're actually in Connie's workplace, and that's really purposeful because one of those discipling relationships that you are now investing in actually began within this space. So one of the things we say all the time within Movement is go and be the church. We use that phrase so often, and you're really putting that into practice even within this space. So would you share just a little bit about what God is teaching you about being the church?
He's taught me a lot about being the church. When I first came to Movement, it was about going to church and doing what you're supposed to do at church, and it has transformed into being a church. And this space is me being the church. It's welcoming people in. It's letting people know that yes, I'm here to pray for you. Yes, I'm here to let you talk. Yes, I'm here to be whatever you need me to be here. And that's how it all kind of started here.
Wow. And that just, to me, is such a picture of your posture to be really generous with your time and seeing it as something God's given to you, and even the spaces that he's provided and the roles that he's brought you into, and just like surrendering that to him and saying, God, would you lead in this and would you move in it? So I guess in that, like, how have you seen God shape your heart to have that posture, to just give of your time and the spaces that he's put you in?
Well, my time here, I am the technology coordinator, so
Right.
I am in charge of a lot of computers. And when I first started here, it was, especially when we started the one-to-one, which is everybody has a computer.
Okay.
And it was whenever I heard a knock on my door, it was, somebody's at my door. And I would answer the door, and you could see by my posture that I didn't want anybody at my door.
Oh.
And now it is more of a, hey, what's up? What can I do for you? And it's a genuine, this is my chance to serve people. I am put here to serve. I am not here for a job. I am here to serve.
Oh, wow.
And it's a pleasure to answer my door now. I hear the door and I get up right away and I go and answer it. And it's just, and it's been a heart transformation. It's not a show. It is.
Right, it's not just a behavior modification. It's God really shaping your
Yes.
heart.
And that comes from movement. That comes from what I've learned at movement.
And I think, when you say that, even just the relationships that you've had within this church community and how God does really move in those relationships to shape our hearts. And even just thinking about the young ladies that you're investing in right now, and, you experiencing that heart transformation yourself, but that's something that's extending into them too as you follow Jesus together. And that's part of discipleship. We even just use that phrase a lot, allowing Jesus to transform our hearts. And so how have you seen them grow and develop as they've followed Jesus together?
Well, my huddle there's 3 teachers in it and another lady that works with people every day. She answers telephone calls for Blanchard Valley. So we all are inundated with people every day. So it's easy for us to talk about, I had to deal with this, and we are really working on how do we handle those situations. And it's been very neat as we gather to see all of us say, hey, I had this difficult situation, but this is how I handled it.
Oh, wow.
And even at church, I've seen them talking with people, and I've seen them doing something that they normally wouldn't do, like giving somebody a hug that they normally wouldn't do, or going up to somebody new and welcoming somebody new.
Wow.
So it's neat to see them developing that discipleship mindset.
Wow. Yeah. And that's true. It's been a heart transformation,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And so I think, look at that and just see that began with you having this heart change and surrendering your time and just what you have to God and allowing him to lead. And then that's bled into these other relationships, and just it speaks this truth that God takes what we offer to him and he just multiplies it beyond what we can picture. And I hope it's an encouragement to you to hear Connie's story in that. And I know God's going to continue to move. And I hope you hear that when you choose to step in that way within our church community, when you choose to give of your time and your talent and your treasure, that's the mission that you're contributing toward. That is the mission that we get to see God's kingdom multiply. And what better way to invest of ourselves. And I know that as we all step in that God is going to continue to multiply what we offer, and I believe that we're going to have just so many more stories just like this that we get to celebrate together, and I look forward to that, and I'm sure you do too, Connie.
I do very much so.
Awesome.
All right, how we doing? Man, a lively crew today. That's awesome. Man, I love hearing Connie's story, and honestly, David and Connie have been a part of movement, as it was said in the video, from the very beginning. So just cool to see how God's moving in her life and shaping others. So cool to hear Connie's story. but just how God's moving. Chelsea, it was okay to hear your story as well. Yeah. Wow. I've been waiting all week for her to make her stage debut, and it did not disappoint. So we have a unique relationship. I encourage her and bring just positivity into her life, and she tries to ridicule and humiliate me. So it works out well. But in all seriousness, man, I just love how God's moving. Love the stories of people where God's moving, whether that you hear from Muriel and Chelsea or Ellen and Connie and so many more. And that segues into what I want to just take a minute before we get into the teaching today. I want to talk about our family gathering that's coming up next Sunday, Sunday evening, February 25th at 6 o'clock, and here at the Movement Building. And I just want to invite you into that. If you're new here and you're like, man, what does it mean to be a part of the family? And maybe this is perhaps my community, and I'm just starting to recognize that. Come, if you've been a part of Movement for a long, long time, and just know, like, I'm part of this family and this community. Come be a part of that. I'm going to share this at the gathering, but I really believe that this is going to be one of those times we get together. Where it's a defining moment type of gathering where we really see God to do something and really set the stage for what he has next in our community. And so I'm looking forward to sharing that with you. If you scan the QR code that was talked about, there's a spot where you can sign up for that. Or if you just write family gathering on your Connect card, we'll get you connected that way. We'd love to know that you're coming, though, just so we can plan ahead, especially if you RSVP online. There's a spot for just knowing if you have kids coming and stuff like that. So if you would take time to do that, it'd be awesome. Even more than that, I just hope you're there. I hope that we get to be a part of that together. And you get to connect with some new people, hear what God's doing, what he's up to, and being invited into some next steps. So be there next week, and it's going to be awesome. So hey, over the last 2 weeks, we've been on a journey together in this series called Time, Talent, Treasure. Let me just set the stage. I talked way too long in the first celebration, so I'm going to try to abbreviate here for a moment. The first 2 weeks of this series, we just talked about this parable that Jesus taught, the parable of the talents, or it's found in Matthew chapter 25, a story of a landowner or a master that goes away on a journey. And he entrusts different amounts of money to 3 different servants and says, this is yours. Well, it's mine, and I want you to take care of it for me. And after a while, he comes back and recognizes that the first 2 had taken that, multiplied it, and put it to work and done something really significant with it. The third, out of fear and really recognizing what he didn't have, buried it in the backyard and waited for the master to come back. And the story that Jesus tells is really about the kingdom, and it's about understanding a few things. One, that God has entrusted us with our lives, right? That they have been given to us from him, and they're not ours. It's something that's been entrusted to us, which leads to this: how we live matters, right? As we look at that story, how we live matters. What are we going to do with the life that's been entrusted to us? And so, therefore, the question ultimately that we have to ask is, how do you see your life? Do you see it as something that's from God and for God, that's been entrusted to you, or do you see your life as something that's yours to do as you please, and really you just kind of you do you? And that is really the question. And when we answer that question, it impacts how we use our time. It impacts how we use our gifts and our talents and the abilities that we have. And we begin to understand that those things need to be in alignment with how we see our life. And today, we're going to talk about this third T out of time, talent, and the last T being treasure. All right, so here's the good news about today is we're going to have a conversation that I really believe is going to point us towards something really, really significant in our spiritual journey. The challenge is it's never easy to talk about our money and our stuff, right? I mean, that is not an easy conversation. In fact, if you're new here, you're like, doggone it, I picked of all days, right? Like of all days to show up. And, because it's true, right? Like it's just not always an easy topic. I mean, we can talk about our time, and every single one of us in here, would love to make the most out of our time. We want our time to be spent with stuff that matters, not wasting it. Every one of us would love to talk about how we can use our gifts and our abilities to be a part of something bigger and better, something that greater than ourselves, so we can be a part of something that matters. Every single one of us in here has a desire deep down within us to play a part, and a significant part, and to contribute. But we get to this idea of money, and it is truly just a sensitive topic. It's sensitive in general, but then you throw in the church or like following God and money, and it just like for some of us, we get pretty squeamish really quick, right? I mean, like it's just something we immediately get on edge a little bit when it comes to money in the church. It reminds me of a guy I knew that was watching TV back in the day. And he was watching a TV preacher, and the TV preacher said, hey, if you call this number and you give $100, he's like, God is going to bless you with $1,000. And so the guy I know decided, well, I'm going to give this a shot. So he called the number, and he said, hey, here's the deal. How about you give me $100, and then God will bless you with $1,000, and we'll all win, right? We'll all come out on top. And but like, truth of the matter is, not an easy topic to talk about, and yet I will tell you, it is out of the 3 weeks of this series so far, this is the conversation that I'm most excited about having. Which sounds weird, I know, but it is, and because I think it's perhaps gonna stretch us and challenge us more than anything else that we'll talk about. And the reason why it's so sensitive, and this is such a big deal, is like the role that money plays in your life and my life, all right? For instance, let's paint a picture here for a moment. Surveys show that 3 out of 4 Americans say that money is their greatest concern, all right? And that is certainly true like today, right? Like most of us understand some of the challenges that are like we're faced with. People are asking questions like, will I ever be able to retire? Or will my kids ever be able to go to college? Or will my kids ever be able to pay off for going to college? Or and those are like big picture things, but let's talk about day to day, right? Like right now, used to be $100 would fill a shopping cart. Now it won't fill like the basket up front, right? I mean, and so it's just like things have changed. Money's tight, like your electric bill, everything's higher. Everything costs more, and the question is, like, how do we navigate through all that? I mean, it has to do with money, right? 60% of divorces cite arguments over money as the greatest factor that led to the separation. So get that, 6 out of 10 people that went through a divorce, money played a role in that. Studies show that well over 6 out of 10 Americans live paycheck to paycheck. Which means this, in a room this size, like over half of the people in this room have real anxiety and stress about how they're going to see their needs met. And studies continue to show that like this is the primary source of anxiety in our lives. And so you get the picture, right? It's a big deal. It's a big deal. And so I have some good news for you. Most of us feel a little weird about talking about money, so we're just going to skip the talk today, all right? So we'll just move forward. Let's just talk about the Super Bowl, all right? How many of you lost money on the Super Bowl? No, I'm joking. So anyways, don't answer that, all right? Dang you, Mahomes. Darn it. All right, anyways. So just kidding. Anyways, but serious, here's the good news. Here's the good news about today, and that is that Jesus knows the role that money plays in our lives, all right? He knows how big of a deal it is. He knows how important money is. And so he speaks into this, like dealing with money more than anything else he talks about in the Gospels. So like more than heaven, more than hell, more than prayer, roughly 25% of all of Jesus' teachings have something to do with money. So get this, like once every couple of years, we'll have a conversation about money. Imagine if one out of every 4 weeks, I was up here and talking about money. You'd probably not be here, right? And some of you are like, preach it, right? So anyways, like honestly, it's just, it's a big deal. It's one of his favorite subjects. And why is that? Well, it's not because Jesus had some big like building program at the synagogue that he was trying to like make happen, right? I mean, for that matter, Jesus spoke most of the time on a mountainside or like out in the country or in people's homes while he's eating dinner or whatever that may look like. And so Jesus wasn't running a building program. He wasn't worried about making sure he could stash away money for his retirement. He had a pretty good idea that that wasn't going to be necessary. And so there are just like things about Jesus speaking into money that we can rest assured, like it's not about him making more money. Like everything that we see in regards to how Jesus lived was like anything but extravagant when it came to financial means. In fact, he relied heavily on other people supporting and caring for tangible needs, but very rarely do we see anything when it comes to money. So, why then? Why does Jesus talk so much about money? Why are we having this conversation today? Why does this matter? Why am I willing to like basically sit up here and risk it? For some of you going like, man, I do not want to talk about this. Why are we having the conversation? And here's why. Jesus is really pointing at something greater. And if you get one thing, like mark this down, remember this, meditate on this, navigate through this, whatever that means for you. And it's simply this: money tells the story of our hearts. Perhaps we'd like to fight against that and argue or say, that's not true, or that's not true in my life. But would you just walk with me for a moment as we think about the role that money plays in our lives? Like, if you want to know what matters to someone, what's really important to them, like, you look at their money, right? You look at the money. Money tells us the story of what we value the most. Like, if you looked at my bank account and I looked at your, list of transactions, we would start to see what matters in our lives. And if there's one thing over and over that we see in the Gospels, if there's one thing that just becomes very evident about what Jesus was concerned about, it was about the heart. Jesus is like over and over and over again concerned about the heart. So much so, at one point, he's talking to the religious leaders and he says this, right? He says, these people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me, right? So you can say the right things, you can do the right things, but where's your heart? Or we read in Luke 11, he's talking about money in Luke 11, and he goes to the religious leaders and he tells them, hey, look, your lives look like a dish that's really nice on the outside, but it's filthy on the inside. And so, like, a dish can look really nice on the outside and yet be disgusting, right? And if you like want an analogy of this, like if you have teenage girls who decide that they're gonna get cereal in a bowl and then sneak it up to their room and then slide the bowl under the bed for a while, right? Like when they're done, there's that little bit of milk left in there, and then that little bit of milk becomes like a science experiment, right? Now imagine, like, you might have a bowl that looks really great on the outside. My girls would never do that. But you have a bowl that looks really great on the outside, but you look in it and see, like, stuff growing in there. You're going, I'm not drinking out of that, right? And Jesus is pointing to this idea that you can, like, things can appear from the outside to look good, but what I'm concerned about is the heart. Jesus is deeply concerned with our hearts. And so here's what I'm going to ask you to do for a couple minutes with me this morning is just journey with me through a really tough subject, but one, like I said, that I think can bring transformation to our heart like few other conversations can. And I'm asking you to set aside some fears or some hesitations when it comes to our understanding of money and the church's role in that. I'm giving you permission right now, like if you feel like this is a conversation built upon like movement needing money, like I would just say, like, this is a bigger conversation. My desire for you and my desire for all of us is that we would understand something bigger and better than that. So much so, like I would just say, like, if that's your primary concern is man, I just don't feel comfortable in giving to this community, then by all means over the course of this conversation, like, find a spot to trust Jesus in what he's going to say, whether that's here or whether you give that somewhere else, because it's bigger than that. In fact, here's what we're after at Movement, what we invite you into all the time are some words out of John chapter 10, right, where Jesus says, I've come that you may have life and have it to the full, have it in abundance. And Jesus invites us into this new way of living, this better way of living this life in the kingdom. And Jesus says, I've come that you may walk in this new life. And what we're going to talk about today, I really believe, is life to the full. It's what Jesus came to offer us. And so I wholeheartedly believe this, that your spiritual life, which is funny even saying that word, because as we read the scriptures, there's not like your spiritual life and your work life and your hobby life. There's your life, all right? Like Jewish culture, like what Jesus was speaking into in that day, were a group of people that didn't see life segmented and compartmentalized, but rather saw your life as your life. And what I want you to hear is that your life is directly connected to how we understand and how we manage our money and our possessions. And so with that being said, a few minutes into this teaching, I want to pray and then hop into Jesus' teaching on our money. So if you would just join me in prayer. God, I just pray over these next few moments that these words that you speak would pierce our hearts, which is what you're ultimately concerned about. God, I pray that this would be a step today in finding freedom and finding life. God, that this would be a conversation that would point us towards something better. And God, I know that in the middle of that, this is one of the toughest subjects that we'll talk about because of the role that money plays in our lives. So God, would you just reveal to us, would your Spirit convict, but also bring about just wisdom and what you have to say to us today. And God, I just pray that we would come open with a posture of an open heart and open mind, and that because of that you would speak into us in new ways today. And I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, well, if you have a Bible, why don't you open up to Matthew chapter 6 with me. Matthew 6 is a part of a few chapters that collectively are called the Sermon on the Mount. It's Jesus' most comprehensive teaching when it comes to life in the kingdom. And if you want to know what Jesus was about, if you want to know what mattered to him the most, just hop into Matthew chapter 5, 6, and 7, and you'll start to see this picture of who Jesus is and the life he has to offer. And in the middle of that, he actually speaks into this topic of money, right? Because 1 out of 4, Jesus over and over again would talk about our treasure. And so he's going to do it in this teaching as well. And so in Matthew chapter 6, starting with verse 19, here's what Jesus says. He says, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moths and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal." A couple things right there I just want to point out. First off, he says, don't store up for yourself treasures on earth. And what we see in the Sermon on the Mount, and really for Jesus' teaching in general, as he talks about earth, and we're going to see something else that he talks about in a minute, this idea of heaven or the kingdom of heaven, is Jesus time and time again is presenting two different kingdoms that we can be a part of. And one's not like heaven as in the sky someday, way out there. But it's like life in the kingdom of heaven begins for people who are following Jesus. It begins now, right? It's an invitation into something now. And so Jesus says, hey, first of all, don't store up for yourselves, right? For you, treasures on earth. Don't spend all your resources and your treasure on things that are part of this kingdom, this earth. Things that won't last, right? Jesus is pointing us this idea of greed, and he's saying, don't be greedy, all right? And then he's going to go on, he's going to say, instead of being greedy, here's the solution, right? But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where moths and vermin do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. And so, like I said, he's not talking about saving some money for someday when you're in heaven that you can spend it and it'll be worth more or anything like that. What he's talking about is investing and using your treasure for things that will last, right? Things that move beyond today and in this moment, things of the kingdom. And Jesus, as he talks about the kingdom, talks about compassion and mercy and justice and how are we investing in things that will carry beyond this life. And so what he's doing in this passage is he's showing the opposite of greed. The antidote to that is really generosity. Like the antidote of greed is generosity, that we become people who are generous. And we talk about we talk about this a lot, right? Like this is life in the kingdom. The kingdom of God is a place of generosity. And he goes on and he explains why this matters so much, right? He says, for where your treasure is, there your heart will also be. Okay? So for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. In other words, what we've already established beforehand is this. The money tells the story of our hearts. And he puts it in an order that's really, really important that I don't want us to miss, because I think it would be really easy to kind of miss the significance of this. He says this, that your heart follows your treasure. All right? Your heart follows your treasure. Now, we've experienced this probably in our lives in different ways. I'll just share one with you really quick. I know this to be true in my life. Like, we always our family drove like cars that have been well used, all right? Like, they've had some mileage put on them. When we buy them, they're not a thing of beauty. In fact, usually it's like, oh, so-and-so is getting rid of their car because like it's old and they don't want it anymore. And I'm like, hey, that sounds like a car for us. So when you buy a car like that, when you have a car like that, here's the cool thing about that. You park anywhere, right? Like, you're like, I think I can squeeze in there, right? Like, you're willing to park anywhere next to any cart, thing, whatever. It doesn't matter. You slide in. When you have a car like that, you drive through the drive-thru and you order food and you get to business, right? You get down to work. You start eating that food. If some ketchup falls on the seat, you just take a fry, kind of scrape that off, right? It's still good. Like when you have a car that's been well used, like you're not overly worried about it. But in the Ferguson house, my daughter Molly turned 16 this year, and it was time for her to drive. What? If you have a 16-year-old and it's like, oh man, I'm not sure I'm ready for that. Be ready for it. It's amazing. All right. So anyways, but we helped her get a car, and I wasn't going to help her get a new car. I was going to give her my old car that I scraped ketchup off of. So I did. And so we bought a new, to us, not new, but we bought a newer car. That's probably the nicest car that we've ever owned. And here's what happened, right? Because I spent this money on this and I treasured it. Guess what? My heart followed that. And so here's some things. Now I park way out at the grocery store, right? No longer do I park close by because I don't want someone to ding it. Now it's like if you go through the drive-thru, it's like not only are you not going to eat in your car, but you're not even going to open the bag because you don't want the smell to permeate through, right? Like all of a sudden I start caring about my car because it's of value. Now, maybe for you it's not a car. Maybe for you had an old junky phone, and when you're at a restaurant and your kids were driving you crazy, you're like, hey, just use my phone. And then you got a new phone, right? Like the iPhone, 32, and you're like, okay, I'm gonna get 3 cases to put this in and a screen protector. And now it's like you don't even want your child to breathe on the phone. You're like, stay away from my phone, right? Because it's of value to you. And what we know to be true is so often our heart follows our treasure. And this is important, right? Because what this means, now hang in there with me, what this means is you get to decide what you care about. You get to actually make a decision of where my heart is going to be. Because where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And Jesus is saying this, and I think it's interesting because so often when we think about giving and generosity, well, what do we want? We want our heart to be somewhere, and then we'll give, right? So we want to give out of emotion, and it feels good, and sort of oh man, I'm really so for instance, the commercial comes on, right, and the sick puppies are there, and Sarah McLachlan starts, the song, and it's like, man, my voice is hoarse right now, but I'll try to get there. In the arms of an angel. You know it. Come on. What else? What goes next? What goes next? There we go. And you're just so moved, and it's emotional. And I'm not on, I've tried to be on the team, the band team. They've said no. I'm working on it. But it's emotional, and your heartstrings are tugged, and we want to give when that happens. But what Jesus is saying is hey, what you treasure, like there your heart will be also. All right, so there's all that. Let's keep reading here. So we get to verse 23. I got to recover. Or 22, sorry. Verse 22 says this. Jesus says, the eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. And if then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? Now, what's really fascinating is right after this, Jesus is going to start talking about money again. So you're like, okay, so Jesus talked about money and treasure and investment, and he's going to get back to talking. But it seems here like all of a sudden Jesus just like transitions into a biology like conversation, right? Or like anatomy, and let me help you understand how anatomy works. And so like, Jesus, what's with the change? And yet what Jesus is talking about here is our treasure. He's talking about generosity. So much so like here's what we need to understand. In ancient Judaism, the eye was like this metaphor for how we viewed our money. And if you take it one step further, if you're reading an NIV Bible, you'll see in verse 22, there's a little C, right, like next to healthy. And then verse 23, there's a D next to unhealthy. And if you kind of go down to the bottom into the footnotes there, you'll see verse 22, it says the Greek for healthy here implies generous. And if you go to verse 23, the Greek for unhealthy here implies stingy. And so what Jesus isn't like talking about some random thing. He's saying, look, he's saying, like, if your eyes are fixed towards being a person of generosity, like your whole body will be healthy. But if your eyes are fixed towards being a person who's stingy and withholds and is not a person of generosity, then your whole body will be filled with darkness, which is like, honestly, it's pretty heavy, right? But this is what Jesus is trying to convey to us. In fact, if you look at Luke chapter 11, he's teaching on money again, and he says this, no one lights a lamp and puts it in a place where it'll be hidden under a bowl. Instead, they put it on a stand so those who come in may see the light. Your eye, here you go again, your eye is the lamp of your body. When your eyes are healthy, your whole body is also full of light. When it's unhealthy, like Jesus time and time again would point us towards this like picture of when you're focused and fixed on being a person of generosity, something happens. And I think about this, and I think about who we are as a community. I think about what we talk about here all the time, right? That Jesus invites us into a life of discipleship. Okay, and what we mean by that, like, let's just talk about this idea of disciple, what a disciple is, because a disciple is not someone who just knows a bunch of information, right? Jesus invites you and I into a life of discipleship. Connie talked about it in the video as well. And a disciple, in our context, what we would say is a disciple is someone who is following Jesus. In other words, they're looking and trying to pattern their life after Jesus. Because they pattern their life after Jesus, they're transformed by Jesus, right? Transformation happens because they've patterned their life after him. And because transformation has happened, now they're living as a person who's a part of his mission. And so that is like, in essence, what it means to be a disciple. It's not just doing something. It's about a heart being transformed and then joining in the mission. And here's what I want us to understand, what Jesus is saying in 22 and 23 of chapter 6 Matthew. He's saying this: the first domino of discipleship is generosity. Like, if you get generosity right, if you understand like your stuff and your money, if you get that right, like it's like the beginning point, right? Like it starts moving us in that direction. It is the kickstart. It involves all of who you are. I mean, I just think about the power of that, and I think about some of what we do within the church, right? Like, if someone's like, I want to make a decision to follow Jesus, I want to trust Jesus with my life, like, I'm guilty, right? My first thing is like, oh, great, you made that decision. You need to get around some other like believers. You need to get in community, join a move group, be connected with other people, maybe even start serving here. You need to attend on a Sunday and be in this conversation. And hey, you know what? It'd be really great if you started reading your Bible. Like, that's going to help you understand. And that's true. And then be like, oh yeah. And like, prayer matters. And I would tell you all of that stuff matters. But what Jesus seems to be pointing us to here, and I think is really, really important, is he's saying, look, if we can get this like understanding of generosity, if we become people who understand that our stuff is not ours, that it's God's, and that like God invites us to be people who give, like if we get that, if we can surrender that thing which so often takes control of our hearts, if we can let go of control in that area, all this other stuff will begin to fall into place. It's that important to Jesus. And honestly, I don't like to hear that, because it's a whole lot easier for me to read and know, and it's a whole lot easier for me to like hang out in a group of people than it is to go, God, I'm going to let go of control over my stuff. And yet Jesus says, like, this is the beginning point of really being a person who walks in light. Now, we go on, and here's why Jesus says this is so important, right? He says this next: no one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you'll be devoted to one and despise the other. And then if you just need some clarity, if you're like, oh man, what are you talking about? He just simply says this, right? You cannot serve both God and money. Okay, let me talk about this for a moment. Money, your money, my money, and it's easy for us to say, no, that's not for me, like something else is, but just hang in there with me. Your money, my money is like no other false god in our lives. And here's why, right? We believe money can offer us things that we can truly only get from God. For instance, money will try to do for us what only God can do. Money will try to provide security, right? If I have this, then I will be secure. Comfort. I find my comfort in knowing that I have enough to be taken care of. Provides meaning, significance, status, identity, purpose, pleasure. Money will try to do for us what only God can do. And Jesus says, therefore, you cannot serve both God and money. And if I'm really honest with you, I wish he would have said you cannot serve God and something else, because this is really, really difficult for me. My guess is this is really, really difficult for you. And my guess is the reason why it's so difficult for you and it's so difficult for me is because it's the thing that we hold on to the most. And Jesus says, you have to let go. Jesus invites us into his kingdom where he is Lord, where he is master, where he has our allegiance, where he has our attention, where he has our affection. And money tells the story of our hearts. And so what we need to understand is this: God is after our hearts. And so let me just practically, let's just dive in for a couple minutes here. Let's dive into what this may look like for you and for me. I'm going to talk about 4 things. I'm going to rush through all of them. It's going to be great. So let's get rolling into this. Let me just give you 4 things, what this means, implications for you, for me, and some practicality in this. So here we go. The first one is this. It all comes back to this: how do I view my life? The question you get to decide is how do I view my life, right? Where is my treasure? How will I view my life? It's a decision. I choose what I treasure, my heart follows, right? He is offering us a path to walk in freedom and to walk in life, and the question is, what am I going to do with that? According to the Gospels, your treasure, the things that you possess, your stuff, your money may be your greatest opportunity for kingdom fruit, right? Like your money and your stuff may be the greatest opportunity you have to experience fruit in God's kingdom, but it also may be the greatest threat to kingdom fruit. It may be the thing that keeps you from ever experiencing the fullness of life that Jesus has to offer. It's that important. Number 2, second implication is this: practice positions us for transformation. Now, here's what that means. Practices are things that we see in the scripture that are ways of living, lifestyle decisions that we make that move us towards who Jesus is and the life that God has for us. So, for instance, practices would be things like fasting and prayer. Practices would be things like silence and solitude and Sabbath, and the list goes on and on. And what I want us to understand is practices are the things that we can do in order to position us in a place where the Spirit can do what only the Spirit can do, right? Like we do practices not so that we are not so that we are the means to transform. Like we do practices that put us in a position for the Spirit to transform us, all right? And so what that means is like there are certain practices when it comes to generosity that allow us to be in a position of to be transformed by the Spirit. You look in the Old Testament, bingo, here we go. Now it's time, right? It's go time, because the thing that we always think about with giving and the thing that we just hope, God, please just don't say, is the word tithe, right? So it's like this word tithe, bring your tithes and offerings. You know, you hear that word within the church. Okay, tithe simply means tenth. And throughout the Old Testament, we see this practice of tithing, of bringing, and not just any 10%, but bringing the first of our 10% to God. And the reason why we do this is it puts us in a position for transformation. That's the reason why it existed in the Old Testament. I mean, look in Deuteronomy 14 with me. It'll be on the screen. It just says this: bring the tithe to eat before the Lord your God at the place he shall choose as his sanctuary. This applies to your tithes of grain, new wine, olive oil, and the firstborn of your flocks and herds. The purpose of tithing is to teach you to always put God first in your lives, right? So the purpose of this practice is to put you in a position where God becomes first priority in your life. And here's what's really interesting. We could do a whole message on tithing, and here's what I'm not doing today is telling you like, hey, you need to start tithing the movement. It would be cool because it would certainly help us move the mission forward. Like if everyone in our church tithed, we'd be having different conversations about even greater conversations about mission and where God's calling us to, to give all that stuff. Honestly, though, like movement last year had one of its best years ever in generosity. And so this isn't a like, oh man, I'm hoping we're making it. It's an invitation into something more. And here's what's so fascinating about tithing is we say, well, this is an Old Testament practice, which is true. But Jesus comes along in the Sermon on the Mount and basically raises the bar on everything, right? Like you've heard it said, do not murder, but I tell you anyone that hates their brother. You've heard it said, do not commit adultery, but I tell you anyone that looks lustfully, and over and over and over again, you see like Jesus raising the bar. And what's so fascinating is oftentimes because of the grip that money has on our heart, what we do with the tithing thing is like, well, Jesus raised the bar on everything else and told us we had to, not only like fulfill the law, but it's so much bigger and greater and we need to go to the next level, but thank you, Lord, that you removed the tithe, right? So like, thank you for lowering the bar there and like setting it so I don't have to worry about that anymore. And what Jesus is not doing in the New Testament is removing the tithe. In fact, in Luke 11, you read about, he speaks to religious leaders about this, but what Jesus is doing is pointing us towards generosity, and that is being people who say, not just a tenth, but all I have, God, is yours. And the tithe is just a means at which allows us to experience, beginning point of experiencing God's blessing in that way in our lives. I would say this, if that's a step you're like, man, that's crazy hard, I would just say, it's probably, the question is like, great, why is that? And how do I step into that? But honestly, I just encourage you, what's a step that moves you outside of your comfort, a first step where you're like, man, I'm going to give to God first. It's going to challenge me. It's going to stretch me. And it's going to cause me to, quote, put God first in my life so that I experience what happens when I make him master and not my money. All right. So that's the second thing. The third thing is this. Giving aligns our heart with the generosity of God. I'm going way over, by the way. So generosity aligns us with, sorry, kids on the move, with the heart of God. I'll just say this, God gave, it's who he is, and it aligns us with the heart of God. I'm going to say one thing here. I didn't even say it in the first celebration, but I'll just say this. Like I've heard a couple stories as I was preparing for this teaching of churches when their time of generosity, like during their service is their time of generosity, that people actually like cheer and celebrate that it's an opportunity to give and that they get to experience alignment with the heart of God. How cool would it be if as a community of believers who are saying we want to pursue Jesus more than anything else, that there was cheering and celebration when it came to the opportunity to give because it aligns our heart with God. And finally, generosity is about blessing and formation. Acts 20:35, don't have a ton of time to go into it, but Jesus says, is recorded saying these words, it's quoted, is more blessed to give than to receive. when we become people of generosity, we experience blessing, not necessarily financial kickback, but blessing of peace from like anxiety, blessing of getting to see other people know Jesus and come to experience wholeness in their lives. The list goes on and on of blessing, but I want to also focus on this other word, formation. And this is where I want to close today. And it's this. Sometimes giving doesn't seem like much of a blessing, but it's a call to be like change our posture. A couple years ago, actually now almost 5 years ago, we stepped into a journey called Made for More, where we asked people who are part of our movement community to step into giving in a way that stretched them, challenged them. We asked people to consider giving up vacations, maybe selling something of significance, dipping into some stored resources or savings that they had, and to do all of this to move the mission of the church forward. We really felt like God was going to do immeasurably more than all we asked or imagined as we did this. Now, for my family, here's some interesting thing. My wife was actually without a job at that point. We were like, she was going to school, so like not only was she not making money, but she was actually like spending money, and so we're like, oh great, what do we do here? And we just felt called to take a step of faith that was really going to stretch us. And so we took the step, and we stepped into generosity, and we made the decision to make a commitment. And sure enough, like pretty soon after that, COVID happened. All right, right. I mean, like all of a sudden, it was like, oh man, what do we do now? And then it was like Kate had started a job, and she lost her job during that time because of like COVID implications and all of that. And then my 16-year-old daughter, who was not 16 at the time, needed braces, and it was like, well, there's your life savings depleted. And like all these things started happening, right? It was like, we made this commitment. It was like, God, we made this commitment, and where are you at? Now we have all these needs, and how are we ever going to fulfill this? And what are we going to do with this? And it was like, God was saying, trust me in this. Just trust me in this. And I will tell you, the formation part for us came in making some decisions to do without, and how God blessed that. But it also came in this. The formation for us was learning to depend on other people, to trust that God would provide in ways that we didn't even really understand, that other people are going to have to show up and serve us. And if you know anything about me, that's not like something I love, to like be dependent on other people. I'm kind of an independent guy, but it's like, nope. Like we gotta like if we're gonna fulfill this commitment, we've got to be open. Like our posture has to change. And God moved. And the beauty of generosity is not only are we blessed because of it, but when we make a decision to sacrificially give and say, Jesus, I'm going to put you first before my money, like we put ourselves in a position with a posture where God can move. And just remember this, our money tells the story of our hearts. Let's pray. God, I just pray for today, so much. I just, I know that there are so many thoughts going in our minds, and honestly, for some of us, like this is a stretch in every way imaginable. But God, would you help us to understand that you're after something bigger than our money, you're after something bigger than an action that we can do, you're after our hearts. And God, would we just trust you in that? God, would we lean into that? God, would we be open to your Spirit's leading? Would we be willing to step outside of what we control and allow you to move in a way that gives control to you? And God, my prayer is that for some of us that have a like tension in our lives right now, we're like, man, I don't want, like, that we just lean in and say, why is that tension so present? For those of us that feel like we've got the giving thing figured out, and we tithe or we give, and we're like, man, we just got this. So I pray that you would show us something greater, that you want all of us, God, that you want every part of who we are, and would we just lean into that? And God, I thank you that you speak into the hard things of life because you want to give us new life. So would we rest in that? Would we come to see this full, abundant life that Jesus says he's come to bring us? And God, would we experience that with our generosity? I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
we would love to have you stand and sing with us one more time. Make it easy to love you. You are good and
see. Oh, so there's, goodness, so many things just to echo Eric, and honestly, just so many experiences that our family has had as well. And just, gosh, as we have entered into generosity over the years, our biggest struggle has just been the hesitations that fear brings, right? The what ifs. What if it's not enough at the end of the month? What if we can't do this? What if we don't have enough for that? But honestly, like the thing that we have come to, the story that God has placed in our hearts from it is about his character, that every time he provides, he is always faithful. He is our security, and we don't have to worry. Even in the song, like, there's nothing that we have to fear. There's 1,000 reasons to trust him. And as we step into generosity, we can really come to know that and believe that with our hearts. So, Chelsea, just talk to us about, like, where you feel like you've grown in your relationship with God and how you view your treasure and, like, how you've responded to him in that.
It's actually a really simple example, but it's not so simple for a cheap person like myself. I see some of you out there as well. No, so
It's frugal. It's frugal.
Yeah, providing meals for people, it's a good thing, right? Wrong. I do not like to do it. It's very stressful. I'm not a very good cook, so I've decided that I am done trying, and then it's going to be Bob Evans from here on out. But as I'm looking, at the menu, dinner for 6, especially when you're looking at the turkey and dressing or pot roast options, it's a little pricey, and I'm not even looking at the tips page, all right? So a lot of people laughed last time. You guys really, whatever, doesn't matter. When I'm like looking wide-eyed at like these prices, all I see is God saying, like, open up your hand, like, stop holding on so tightly to the money that is not yours. It's what's been given to you. And so that's the way I want you to show love. So that's what I've been doing. If you want pot roast, great. A loaf of banana bread, why not make it 3? Just do it. But no, really, don't do that much.
I mean, we even talked about just how, like, you said it's simple, and sometimes, like, as we talked, you, like, described it as silly, and yet, like, at the same time, like you said, like, it is significant because it is, like, our posture of, like, our coming to the point of open-handedness, right? Like, we start like this. We want to hold it as our own, and yet it's not ours, and yet we, like, slowly start to, like, bring about so that our hand is fully open. And it boils down to, as Eric mentioned, like, do we trust God? Are we trusting him with our money? And even how you mentioned at the beginning with, like, Ruby and her procedure, do we trust him with our children, our precious treasures? Like, do we trust him with our hearts, with our lives? And I think that as we, like, begin to surrender those things to God more and more, we'll see that we can trust him, and he will do immeasurably more than we could ask or imagine. And as we have just, like, talked about, wanting to invest in God's kingdom, we want to be good stewards of our time and our talents and our treasures. We have the opportunity to do that every moment. God gives us so many opportunities. So as we go out from here, let's do that together. Movement, go and be the church.